78 men, armed with nothing but kitchen cleavers and roasting spits, broke out of a training camp and ultimately annihilated multiple regular Roman armies. In military history, this stands as one of the most absurd yet structurally terrifying realities ever recorded. Common logic dictates that a handful of lightly armed prisoners should be crushed by local militia within hours. Instead, they expanded into a fighting force of tens of thousands, defeated consular legions, and brought the Roman Republic to the absolute brink of systemic collapse. How could a desperate band of enslaved fighters dismantle the most dominant military machine of the ancient Mediterranean? Today, we step into the untold tactical shadows of the Third Servile War to unmask the hidden truth of the great Gladiator Revolt. Report for duty with a like and subscribe for next week's Grand Assault. Rome in 73 BC was an expanding titan, but its foundation rested on a massive, unstable fault line. The relentless campaigns in Hispania and Mithridatic Asia Minor had drained the Italian peninsula of veteran legions. In their absence, the domestic economy relied entirely on millions of enslaved laborers, agricultural workers, and prisoners of war. Nowhere was this concentration more dangerous than in the fertile region of Campania. In the city of Capua, the gladiatorial ludus of Lentulus Batiatus held Thracian, Gallic, and Germanic captives. These were not mere laborers swinging scythes. They were men forced to train daily in the specific mechanics of lethal, close-quarters combat. Roman gladiatorial combat emphasized distinct weapon systems, acute spatial awareness, and exploiting minute gaps in opponent armor. A gladiator fought as a highly tuned individual, relying on reflexes and asymmetric weapons rather than the locked shield wall of a Roman legionary. When 78 of these men realized their survival odds were dropping to zero, they executed a localized, violent breakout. Escaping the compound with only kitchen implements, they moved rapidly to secure a transport wagon carrying actual gladiatorial weapons. They abandoned the urban confines of Capua and marched toward the highly defensible terrain of Mount Vesuvius. They elected 3 commanders to lead them. The Senate in Rome barely registered this as a legitimate military threat. They viewed it as a local policing issue, a mere nuisance to be stamped out by a minor magistrate. They dispatched Praetor Claudius Glaber with a hastily raised force of 3,000 men. These were not hardened legionaries drawn from the frontiers. They were local militia, poorly equipped, hastily drilled, and expecting a quick, bloodless surrender. The Roman command structure drastically underestimated the physics of desperation. They failed to account for the tactical intellect of their targets. Vesuvius provided a formidable natural fortress for the escaped fighters. The mountain slopes were steep, rugged, and heavily overgrown with wild, thick vines. Glaber arrived at the base and assessed the topography with standard Roman operational logic. He identified a single, narrow, traversable path leading directly to the rebel encampment near the summit. Rather than expend his untrained militia in an uphill assault against elite melee fighters, Glaber chose the strategy of containment. He constructed a fortified camp at the base of the sole pathway.
The palisade is secure. Hold your
His
positions.
logic was sound.
Vigilance is paramount.
Cut off the gladiators' supply lines, deny them water, and let starvation force a surrender. Time and human logistics were theoretically on the side of the Romans. The militia merely had to hold their ground. But the gladiator command inverted the tactical geometry of the mountain. They recognized that the Roman blockade relied on a fatal assumption. Glaber believed the sheer cliffs on the other side of Vesuvius were physically impassable. The rebels leveraged the natural material around them. His men harvested the thick wild vines hanging from the volcanic rock. They braided and twisted these natural fibers into long, structural ropes, testing them for load-bearing tension. The physics of the descent required immense upper body strength, an attribute the gladiators possessed in abundance. When night fell, they enacted a maneuver that entirely defied Roman doctrinal expectations. One by one, the gladiators rappelled down the sheer, unguarded cliff face in absolute silence. The darkness concealed their movement. The soft earth muffled their descent. They bypassed the blockade entirely, completing a massive vertical flanking maneuver. The militia in the camp below slept in their tents, confident that the rough terrain protected their rear. They left no sentries facing the wild brush. The trap was meticulously set. The hunters had silently become the hunted. The descent was completed. The rebels gathered at the base of the mountain. They moved through the darkness in a loose skirmish formation, approaching the unfortified rear of the Roman encampment. Silence. Then it broke. The gladiators hit the Roman perimeter with terrifying kinetic force. This was not a clash of formal lines. It was a close quarters infiltration that instantly collapsed into a chaotic melee. The Roman militia, jolted awake, struggled to form any cohesive defense. Roman military doctrine relies entirely on the tight, locked shield wall of the maniple or cohort. It requires spacing, mutual protection, and disciplined forward pressure. In the dark, scattered among tents, that vital cohesion dissolved instantly. The gladiators, trained for individual duels and asymmetric weapon combat, excelled in this highly fragmented environment. Thracian sicae, curved swords designed specifically to reach over or around shields, found exposed necks and unarmored limbs. Gallic longswords generated massive kinetic arcs, shattering the flimsy wooden shields of the Roman conscripts. The pressure moved violently through the camp ranks. Panic acts as a deadly contagion in untrained troops. Within minutes, the Roman formation broke entirely. The militia routed, abandoning their camp, their vital supplies, and, crucially, their weapons. The gladiator force secured a massive cache of Roman scuda, gladii, and armor. This capture of military hardware was the physical catalyst for their expansion. They stripped the dead. They armed themselves not as arena fighters, but as heavy infantry. Word of the crushing Roman defeat at Vesuvius spread rapidly across the Campanian countryside. The initial 78 swelled into thousands. Shepherds, agricultural slaves, and impoverished freemen abandoned their fields to join the rebellion. The rebel commanders understood that raw numbers alone would not win a sustained war against the Republic. They instituted a rigorous, systematic training program. They paired arena veterans with fresh recruits, teaching them the structural mechanics of the Roman shield wall. The rebel army became a highly lethal hybrid force. They combined the disciplined, locked shield defense of captured Roman gear with the ferocious, high-momentum offensive charges of Celtic and Germanic warbands. Rome responded by escalating the threat level. Praetor Publius Varinius was dispatched with two separate, larger forces. The Roman command structure still sought to trap the rebellion through multi-pronged pincers. But the logistical strain of moving regular troops through mountainous terrain severely slowed Roman momentum. The Gladiator vanguard explicitly exploited this friction. They utilized light cavalry recruited from Campanian herdsmen for rapid reconnaissance. This allowed them to detect Roman troop movements early and defeat Varinius's subordinates in detail, attacking isolated columns before they could merge. In a defining clash, the rebel vanguard intercepted Varinius's main camp. Before the collision, the rebels executed a forced march, positioning their hybrid infantry on elevated, broken ground. The Romans, exhausted by their pursuit, were forced to attack uphill. The physical exhaustion of the Roman infantry compromised their shield alignment. The Gladiator heavy infantry formed up. They presented a dense, terrifying wall of captured Roman shields. The Roman forces, lacking their veteran centurions, hesitated. The rebel formation advanced with controlled, steady pressure. When the lines collided, the physical impact was devastating. The rebels used the weight of their dense formations to push the Romans backward into difficult terrain. Terrain friction compressed the Roman ranks, preventing them from utilizing their short swords effectively. Gallic warriors drove their heavy shields into the disorganized Roman front. The pressure displaced the Roman center. Shield overlap failed. Cohesion vanished. The Roman line fractured. The rebels struck relentlessly at exposed gaps. The resulting collapse was total. Varinius himself barely escaped, leaving his fasces and warhorse behind. the impossible had happened. A slave army had broken the operational capacity of multiple Roman praetors. What moment truly determined the outcome of this early campaign? By 71 BC, the rebellion had defeated multiple consular armies and ravaged the Italian peninsula. The Senate, facing a genuine existential crisis, handed supreme command to Marcus Licinius Crassus. Crassus understood perfectly that this was no longer a standard policing action. It was a total, unforgiving war. He financed and raised 6 new legions out of his own pocket, restoring absolute, brutal discipline to the ranks through the ancient punishment of decimation. He stabilized the human morale factor through sheer, uncompromising terror. Meanwhile, the main rebel force moved to the southern toe of Italy, negotiating with Cilician pirates for transport to Sicily. The pirates took the rebel gold and vanished. The rebel army was firmly trapped against the sea. Crassus immediately seized the operational initiative. Instead of engaging the hardened rebel veterans in a chaotic pitched battle, he utilized superior Roman engineering. He ordered his legions to construct a massive circumvallation line across the entire isthmus of Bruttium. They dug a trench 15 feet wide and 15 feet deep, backed by a fortified timber wall stretching nearly 40 miles. This was geopolitical logistics applied to a single geographic choke point. Crassus intended to let the brutal winter and rapid starvation break the rebel army. The daily caloric requirements of tens of thousands of trapped rebels created massive internal friction. Food ran out. Horses were slaughtered for meat. The cold relentlessly withered the rebel ranks. The Gladiator command faced a grim, inescapable tactical reality. One breach would end everything. The plan was one mistake away from collapse. What did the commander risk? A failed assault against a fortified Roman wall meant the annihilation of his entire people. In the dead of a freezing, stormy night, the rebels ordered a mass, desperate breakthrough. The rebels used fascines, branches, and earth to rapidly fill a small section of the Roman trench. They concentrated their heavy infantry into a massive, dense spearhead. They attacked the wall with absolute kinetic desperation. The Roman sentries, blinded by the driving storm, were overwhelmed by the localized pressure. The rebel vanguard tore through the timber defenses, sacrificing thousands to create a narrow, bloody corridor. The remaining army poured through the gap. They had escaped the geographic trap, but their strategic cohesion was permanently fractured. The final definitive confrontation occurred at the Silurius River. The rebel army, deeply divided and physically exhausted by relentless pursuit, finally turned to face the combined weight of Crassus's veteran legions. The Thracian commander killed his own horse before the lines engaged, signaling to his men that there was no retreat. No way back. The combat mechanics of the final battle were a brutal testament to Roman industrial attrition. The legions deployed in a classical triplex acies. They maintained perfect spacing, rotating fresh cohorts to the front line to relieve exhausted men. The rebel hybrid infantry fought with incredible ferocity, but they could no longer break the relentless Roman shield cohesion. The Roman gladius systematically dismantled the rebel charge, exploiting microscopic openings in armor and formation. The gladiator commander attempted a desperate decapitation strike, pushing violently through the dense lines to kill Crassus directly. He was heavily wounded in the leg, brought to his knees, and entirely surrounded.
Leave no space.
The rebel line collapsed. The aftermath was devastating. Over 60,000 rebels fell in the vast killing zone. Crassus captured 6,000 survivors and ordered them crucified along the Appian Way, creating a horrifying geopolitical warning stretching entirely from Capua to Rome. The Gladiator Uprising did not destroy the Roman state, but it permanently exposed the fatal vulnerability of an empire built on chained labor. Its principles of asymmetric warfare and tactical mobility would reappear centuries later as the Roman frontiers finally buckled. What war topic should we break down in the next video?